Saturday View with Ronan Berry. With thanks to Lumclean Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LumcleanEnergy.com. Call 0818 300 103. Text or WhatsApp your Saturday View to 083 3010 103.
Hello and a very good morning to you. It's Saturday the 28th of December 2024. I'm Ronan Berry and this is your last Saturday View of 2024. Kind of hard to believe we're at this end of the year already, and we're in that little period between Christmas and New Year's where confusion abounds everywhere. People aren't sure what day it is, what time it is. Many people are probably only getting out of bed now. Some people are probably only getting into bed right now, such is the season that it is. But anyway, plenty to give you this morning between now and 11 o'clock on Saturday View. A little bit later, we're going to meet a brilliant graphic artist from Riverstown near Burr, and he has just released his first graphic novel, and it's all centred around the War of Independence, and he sees it as a really creative and ingenious way almost of making people more aware of some of the stories and what exactly was happening and the different interactions between people around the War of Independence. So you're going to meet some characters, meet the illustrator later on, and find out how you can get your hands on that beautiful book too. This person has huge experience in the animation with many of the big production companies across the world. So really looking forward to meeting that. Another, dare I say, almost local hero later on too. We will touch on that story too, that Caroline Dwan Stanley has resigned from Sinn Féin. And you'll probably recall after the general election when her husband Brian Stanley was elected as an independent Republican TD for Laois back at the end of November. She gave some very, very strong statements to Midlands 103 international media as well. We have put a call out to Councillor Dwan Stanley this morning to see if she'd like to come on and just talk about her and can reconfirm her reasons for resigning from the Sinn Féin party. And we'll touch on that again later in the show. That and so much more. I suppose it is getting near the end of the year. A lot has happened this year, both locally, both nationally and right across the world. 2024 was, which might not be a major surprise to you, the hottest year ever on record, and clear signs of global warming and continuing climate change abound too, and witnessed by floods and some many kind of disasters across the world too. A year that has been marked by conflict, by crisis, by uncertainty, by invasions, by war, by genocide, by mass killings, big political events this year as well. About 40 to 45% I think of the world's democracies casted votes in 2024. That's a couple of billion people. So huge amounts of changing out there. But let me know, what was the standout moment for you from 2024? It can be on any subject, on any matter. What for you, be it personally, be it locally, nationally, internationally, what was that moment that defines 2024 for you so far? 083 3010 103, the text or WhatsApp number, or you can give us a call here on 0818 300 103, and I'd be happy to bring some of those standout moments from people of the Midlands to everybody else around the Midlands throughout the show between now and 11 o'clock as well. But I'm going to start this morning and begin by looking at some statistics. There's been a 9% increase in domestic abuse-related contacts to Gardaí in 2024. And this kind of comes on the back of increase in prosecutions, including, say, non-fatal strangulations. There was 54 cases since 2023. Stalking, a new offence that was brought in 11 cases since 2023 as well. And even more prosecutions around coercive control, 41 cases between 2023 and 2024. And like I said when I was speaking to Aidan Barry there a few minutes ago, lots of things like statistics around road deaths. There's been 6 people killed on Irish roads since Monday this week. 4 of them were pedestrians. And it really seems to be everywhere that pedestrians are being killed on our roads. So what's happening there, what's going on, is very hard to put a finger on it. Let's hope we can get to the bottom of that and end those needless deaths as well. But the growth in cases that have been brought, and got national attention, particularly around domestic abuse, around rape, around coercive control, is very hard not to notice it over the past year as well.
Saturday View with thanks to Lumclean Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LumcleanEnergy.com.
Some gremlins, New Year's gremlins in the system at the minute anyway. We're going to move on. We're going to try and get Ellen O'Malley Dunlop back on the phone as soon as we possibly can. But I've asked you for some of your standout moments from 2024, and you've got busy texting in already, and some people, are saying Offaly winning the Under-20 All-Ireland final. That came in from James and Clara. Undoubtedly a big moment for a lot of people as well. Somebody said, morning Ronan, last year was incredible. Many changes and events and key moments. Personally for me, was the rise of women in politics and the highlight election of female Count Corla in the Dáil as well. So again, people finding some very big and very standout moments there too. So yeah, our first ever female Count Corla elected into the Dáil too. So big changes happening. Was it enough? Let me know. 083 30 10 103. But 2024 was also a big moment for a man from Riverstown near Birr, because Sean Hogan released Brotherhood Part 1. It is a 92-page black and white graphic novel set during the Irish War of Independence. It's primarily set in sort of North Tipperary, verging towards the Offaly border as well, and it includes 76 pages of story with a full colour cover and is geared towards a very mature audience. As I say, the main man behind it is Sean Hogan, and Sean joins me live from Finland now. Very good morning, Sean.
Hi Ronan, how you doing? Just calling you here from Finland. Hope you're doing well.
Fantastic. You're well travelled, I suppose, and we'll get into your background in it too. But I suppose for illustrated graphic novel, why the War of Independence, and I suppose why a graphic novel?
Yeah, well, I've always loved graphic novels. Comics are my favourite medium to enjoy. So this is my third book now, so I guess it was coming down the pipeline. And the book, it's been a long time coming. I started writing it in 2018 and finished the script in 2019 when I was living in Kilkenny. And of course, the centenary, was very much on my mind. And I definitely wanted to write something a little more mature. My previous two books were kind of more geared towards a younger audience. So I wanted to do something more mature, kind of learn a little bit more about Irish history. And and with the centenary, it seemed like a great idea to start working on the book.
For listeners, just give them a brief outline what exactly a graphic novel is.
Yeah, graphic novel. I think a lot of people would know comic books, from Spider-Man or from even the Beano or the Dandy. The graphic novel, then, it's kind of a longer work. Usually it's above 50 pages. And, graphic novels, it is just comics, but it kind of gives it a more mature kind of sounding name to it. So when you say you read graphic novels, you can kind of sound a little more like you're reading art rather than just comics. So it just sets the minds over what you're actually going to read.
And undoubtedly not something that can be produced overnight. The drawing and the creation just started quite a few years ago.
It did, yeah. And actually, it's funny. It's a book about Ireland. It's a book about Irish history, but it's a very international book, really. I wrote it when I was living in Kilkenny, and then I started drawing it when I lived in Denmark. And then a huge amount of the drawing, I currently live in Finland, so a huge amount of drawing was done here in Finland, especially in the last 6 months. So really international book. But as you said, it takes a long time to create comics. It's very labor intensive. Each page in the book for drawing, it takes about 2 days of labor. So with 76 pages, that's a huge amount of time, half a year of my life there drawing the book. But time well spent and time very much enjoyed.
Are there many redraws or redrafts then, page by page? Is 2 days an average figure? Like, can it often stem to more than that? Or maybe you go back and completely revise pages?
Yeah, now I had a tight deadline for the book, so there is some pages I would have loved to redraw, but, you have to keep moving and keep going forward. And that's kind of the beauty of comics, is that, with the time pressure, you have to do it and get it done. Or otherwise, you could just spend days and days on the one page. But there's a lot for the writing. There's a lot of rewriting for sure. That's a huge amount of rewriting during the script stage. And then for the comic book, when you're drawing it, I would do like kind of small drawings first, just to get the idea, so I can see the whole book in these very small thumbnail drawings that give me a good idea of the flow and how each page would look. And then, so actually my how I draw the book is digitally first on the computer. So I have a lot of versatility when I'm drawing it. So I can kind of move drawings around. I can make them bigger or smaller. So by drawing first on the computer, it gives me a lot of freedom. And then I print them out and I can draw them. I ink them then traditionally with pens and with brushes. So I have kind of the best of both worlds then. I can, change a lot of things on the computer, and then I have a very nice, relaxing way of inking then at the final.
That's lovely to know that there is that beautiful blend of both the very modern but also back to the old style too of actually inking them as well. Take us through the main parts. The main character in this, the book, it centres around MacDara. Talk to us about MacDara, and maybe you can reveal some aspects of the story that people will uncover if they read Brotherhood.
Yeah, MacDara, he's 15 years old in the book. He's growing up in Tipperary on a farm. As it's revealed in the book, his older brother died in the Great War, so that's having a huge impact on his family as the book begins. His sister Eve, she's secretly dating a black and tan soldier, which when I was doing the research for the book, I realized that was a huge thing and was really frowned upon in Ireland at the time. And there was huge consequences for that. So the book opens up. MacDara is after being threatened by the black and tan soldier, and he grabs a stone and he clocks the black and tan soldier across the head, and he dies. So it starts with a dramatic bang, and then him and his friends, they decide the only way to kind of protect MacDara, to hide his identity, is to pretend to be, like the volunteers. And so they begin to kind of do more violence as a way of escaping violence. So they end up going down this very violent cycle as things get more and more deadly as the book progresses.
Hence why maybe it has that slightly adult audience on it as well. But the book has been described that it has a richly developed cast and sharp commentary, and it critiques the myths of heroism and explores the personal costs of freedom during a pivotal moment in Irish history. So you're going quite deep with this one.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to explore a lot of different themes in the book. I had a lot of things I wanted to get through. I mean, the War of Independence as well, as it's been explored in fiction, there's some great films, there's some TV shows, but sometimes it's very dry. So I wanted to explore it in a more maybe modern way and kind of through the characters especially, bring the reader into the world of the War of Independence. War of Independence, it really is, the birth of a country, and it works so well for the characters. They're all teenagers, they're coming of age. So there is a real, the two stories really work together. And as the characters are trying to, gain their independence, there's a rebellion happening in the background. So that worked really well. The two things really complemented each other. So I was super happy when I kind of came across those ideas. So it just really worked well. And then each of the characters, they kind of just came into their own as I was writing the book. I discovered what each of them kind of were going through, what their family life was like, how Irish society at the time impacted their lives. And I think the script really turned out well. I'm most happy with the script, and especially it really comes into in the final part 2. Everything really comes to a conclusion, and I'm very happy with how it works out.
And it's like you shared some parts of the book with me by email last night, and actually one image jumped out at me. It's like an older gentleman with a bald head, and he's pouring what I presume is whiskey from a Powers bottle into a kind of a china cup, and he's saying 1 week it's cowboys and Indians, and the next it's rebels and Brits. Oh, to be young again and have such imagination. So really, all these, even the smaller characters in the book, you've really put huge effort into developing those.
Yeah, and that's Old Man O'Donovan. He's one of my favourite characters in the book, and he kind of really sets them off on their kind of violent journey. He kind of lets on that he's just an old man. He likes drinking a cup of tea, but actually when you meet him, he's a drunk, and it's hard to figure out whether the stories he's telling the characters are just fiction or whether they actually happened. And there's a bit of a confusion then. The characters really take him at his word. He gives them a gun and really starts them off on their journey. So I think he was actually a very important character for the book, and is even more important in the second part.
Yeah, you can imagine even an important character, because nationally and pretty in the years of centenaries, as people reflect, like a lot of stories that families might have heard or thought about a relative or somebody in their area may not have been quite true because there was a lot was kept secret or just not spoken about. So it's quite interesting that kind of the different narratives and the different perspectives coming out even from one character and maybe saying one thing and possibly doing the other. So again, like massive work. Your inspiration for those characters then, you've referenced some kind of actual events, but do you look at old notes then as well, or is a lot of it literally just in your own head and your own interpretation of what may have happened?
Yeah, well, when you're writing the book, obviously when it's set in history, you have to do a lot of research. So I did read a lot of stuff. Some of the lines in the book are actually quotes from people at the time, so that really adds a little bit of flavour to the text. But I think for the actual characters, I took a lot from myself. So kind of looking at my teenage years and what were my frustrations growing up, and how do they, and then putting them into the characters and figuring out how it works in the story. And my writing process is quite, I get ideas, they come to me, and then I write them down, I write the script, and then I have to reflect and be like, okay, where did that idea actually come from? Like, so McDara has issues with his family, so where did they actually come from? And then be like, oh, okay, I'm actually looking at my past and figuring things out. So, and then I can go back and kind of nuance things and make them a little bit stronger. And, it's interesting, especially with Old Man O'Donovan, with these stories and can you actually believe them? A big thing I wanted to explore in the book is actually, these myths that we have about the War of Independence and about Irish history and, are they actually true? Like what we believe, is it actually reality? And, especially growing up as a teenager in Ireland, I think, we didn't as teenagers really understand what happened. We had these kind of myths of heroism, but when you actually read kind of the details of the time, things are actually a lot darker. There's a lot more nuance, a lot more going on. And especially in the book, with these black and tan soldiers, I did try to humanize them a bit. They weren't just, Nazis or anything. They had their own thoughts. They were people. How do people go to these extremes, end up in these terrible situations, do these terrible things, and kind of explore that and figure out, where does our humanity stop and where can people get to this point?
Yeah, I think that's it. Sometimes it's almost, there's a easy to maybe ignore or not look at the actual extreme level of violence that was happening at that period too, and you are attempting to bring that out in the book as well. The book, though, it's self-published, and you had to go and you started a Kickstarter campaign to raise the money to publish it, and that went really well for you.
Yeah, that was a wonderful experience. It's a huge way now online. A lot of artists they use crowdfunding to fund their projects, and I had seen a few of my friends had great success with Kickstarter, so I decided to give it a go. 140 people backed the book to bring it to life, and that happened in September. The whole crowdfunding campaign, it lasted about a month, and it was super. It went way better than I could have ever imagined. So people could kind of pre-order the book, and they could get all sorts of extras as well, different prints and postcards. It went really, really well. And it took all the financial pressure of printing the book off of me, because I could fund the whole print run from that crowdfunding campaign. So it was really super. I'm so thankful to everyone who heard about the book, who backed the book and supported it. It really meant a lot to have so many friends, neighbours, and people from further afield, people from America who I've never met, people from Germany, they all backed the book. So it was really, really an incredible experience. And I'll probably do the same again for the next book as well. And it was just a really wonderful experience.
To date, your credits include animated projects for Disney, Warner Brothers, Nickelodeon, Apple TV Plus. So you've a strong background in animation too. What first tweaked your interest in that, and how did you begin to make a career from it?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, animation I always thought was something that you could only do in America. Especially growing up in Tipperary, there wasn't that much animation happening there. So I always thought growing up that, you'd have to go to America to do that. And then I was in college and I was working on my comic books when I was in college. And then when I came out, there's a brand new studio opening up in Kilkenny at the time. And I didn't study animation. I studied 3D design. But through my comic books, I kind of used that as my portfolio, and I got my foot in the door there at Lighthouse Studios to work on a show for Amazon. And from there, then, it's just been a whirlwind, kind of moving through different studios and working on different projects. So, yeah, in Kilkenny, then I moved over to Cartoon Saloon, and I got to work on the show for RTE and Nickelodeon there. And then I moved to Denmark, and I worked for a game studio there. And then I got a call from an old coworker of mine who was then in Finland. So then I moved to Finland, and I've been here now for 4 years. So been working on shows for Disney. I worked on Tom and Jerry for Warner Brothers here. The last show I worked for was for Nickelodeon in the US. So so it's amazing getting to work on these huge projects with pretty big budgets and huge teams. Getting to work very closely with directors in LA and New York. You get to learn a lot and you learn fast. And it's great to with these huge projects, they're for a huge audience, so you can kind of take your learning from that, and then I can apply it to my smaller work, for my more personal work in books like Brotherhood.
Indeed, a very, very personal work, and anyone that can kind of get their hands on it or just see it will see that instantly as well. And actually, speaking of that, how can people actually get a copy of Brotherhood?
Yeah, well, if you live locally, there is copies of Brotherhood in Super Value in Birr and in Birr Castle Domain. They're probably the easiest ways to get it. If you happen to be up in Dublin doing some shopping, you can get it from the Big Bang Comics in Dundrum or in Forbidden Planet, which is on the Quays in Dublin. And I also have an online store, so people can go to sean-hogan.com and you can find my store there.
And will there be a Brotherhood Part 2 or even subsequent sequels?
Yeah, there will be a Brotherhood Part 2. So originally I wrote the whole thing as just one book, but it soon became clear that the book was too ambitious to kind of draw in one go. So the conclusion is in Part 2, and it's fully written. So I'm going to be looking for some funding from the Arts Council now to hopefully get Brotherhood Part 2 finished just a little bit quicker. And I'd love to have that out maybe in a year's time.
Fantastic. And would you stick within that same time period of Irish history, or are there other periods you might consider exploring down the line?
Yeah, I'm writing my next book at the moment, and that's actually set currently today in Dublin. Kind of my experiences growing up, or as a young person in their 20s trying to create art in Dublin. So that's my next book. But yeah, I'd love to keep exploring Irish history. I mean, we have such a rich history going back thousands of years. And also I'm also working on a book based on St. Bridget. But that's a few years out, and that will be for children. So yeah, lots of projects on the go. And I mean, when you have so much inspiration from Irish history, it's all there. So it's just waiting to be met.
No point asking you about goals and objectives for 2025 anyway. It sounds like you already know exactly what you're doing and where you're going. But Sean, congratulations. A fantastic book. Brotherhood is the name of it. Launched in Birr last month, and you've drawn on lots of local history and really bringing that period of the War of Independence to life on page. Fantastic achievement, and looking forward to seeing the subsequent works as well. Sean Hogan, thank you so much for that this morning.
Thank you so much, Ron. Happy New Year.
And to yourself as well. So there you go. Like again, Sean, just that little snippet too of somebody from the Midlands area who decides that they'd love to do a career in maybe in illustration or animation. And how do you go about doing that from the Midlands of Ireland? Well, there you go. There are ways you can forge that career too. And thanks to Sean, as I say, it really is a fantastic book, really interesting, aimed more at the adult audience than the children's audience, because as Sean has pointed out, there's a level of violence in it too, but really exploring some of the deeper themes around that period of Irish history as well. So congratulations to Sean. Great to see a local person doing so well and getting that very, very personal piece of work launched and published too. Time now for a very quick break. After that, we're going to look at some of your standout moments from 2024.
Saturday View, with thanks to Lumcloon Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LumcloonEnergy.com.
I asked you to kind of text in 083 3010 103, text or WhatsApp, or give us a call 0818 300 103. Some standout moments of 2024. Mick has texted in to say, hey Ronan, the highlights for me in 2024 were seeing Paul McCartney and Taylor Swift in concert, not together of course, two separate concerts, and getting his footage used in an Amazon Prime 3-part feature. Oh, and Wham having the Christmas #1 Mick says it's the simple things in life, and he says Happy New Year to you and all in Midlands 103. Well, many happy returns, Mick, and keep up the great work in 2025 as well. We've had one texter asking about, said that this was the year that they requested to be put out on air the lack of doctors, GPs in the Offaly area, which is a very important issue to cover. Indeed, it is one that has been covered numerous times on Midlands Today, and actually an issue that I spoke to then Sinn Féin TD Brian Stanley about on this show back in maybe April or May of this year. And speaking of Deputy Brian Stanley, who of course was re-elected to Dáil Éireann after the general elections at the end of November this year, his wife, Councillor Caroline Dwan Stanley, last night announced or confirmed her resignation from the Sinn Féin party too. The Laois Councillor announced the resignation last night and said she'd given the decision careful consideration and reflection. She cited a controversy in July of this year surrounding her husband and related matters since, which she claimed included outright attacks on her personally and on her family. Now, Brian Stanley left Sinn Féin in October, saying he had been subject to a seriously flawed complaints process, which he likened to a kangaroo court. I'm going to take you back to late December, because after the general election count in Portlaoise, when Brian Stanley was re-elected as an independent Republican TD for Laois, Councillor Dwan Stanley spoke to Midlands 103's David Hollywood, and here's what she had to say.
Relieved, David, to be quite honest with you, after 5 months of turmoil and literally a tsunami that has come my family's way. As I've said earlier to previous people who have interviewed me, behind the exterior we're human beings. Brian has 2 children, Laura and Mark. He has a granddaughter, Leah, and we've been shocked to the core in terms of what's gone on over the last... We've been dealing with this for the last 5 months behind the scenes. I know it's only out there publicly for the last 6 weeks or 7 weeks or so, and we had hoped for a different outcome. I believe things could have been handled differently, and we could have had an outcome that was favourable for all. And if that even involved Brian retiring or whatever, I know he would have had no issue with doing that. And we would today maybe have 85% of the Sinn Féin organisation that now stands with Brian Stanley outside of the organisation could have been inside the organisation rather than out. So, as I said to you, it's a relief for us as a family, tinged with sadness too, with the way things have ended. But no point in crying over spilt milk. My family are my priority. My husband, Brian's children, his granddaughter, and everything else comes second after that. That's the way I look at things.
I was speaking to Brian a few moments ago, and he's still visibly angry towards Sinn Féin about what's happened. Do you share those same feelings? No,
I'm not angry. I'm not angry towards Sinn Féin. I'm completely disillusioned. And in relation to Brian, what I would say to you, he's given 40 years of his life, and I've given 27. And Brian's 2 children would have been brought up in an environment, back in the day where it would have been toxic to be involved in republicanism. Their house would have been raided on a regular basis because of Brian's political beliefs. Laura would have had an asthma attack on one occasion in the middle of a raid. And we came from that to where things were up to, say, 5 months ago, where Brian succeeded in taking his first seat on the town council, then onto the county council, then elected to the Dáil in 2011. We've worked so hard, tirelessly, down through the years, and I would like to just acknowledge that on that journey, we met some of the best Republicans, some of the best people on that journey, some very, very dedicated Republicans, and we'll always have those memories. So I'm delighted that we've met those people. We wouldn't have got to where we are without their help. But as I said, it's a sad day, and yet it's a happy day for us personally as a family. Angry, no, I'm just disillusioned. What I would say to you is that a small group of Sinn Féin members at local level set out to destroy Brian's political career, to destroy him, to come after me and literally our family. And sadly, I've come across a WhatsApp group that was set up about 3 weeks ago, Sinn Féin, Leave Sinn Féin WhatsApp group, and what's in those text messages are absolutely toxic, despicable and disgusting. One member in that group wished that Brian might be dead before polling day. It's absolutely toxic. They've brought back people who were expelled out of the party 11 years ago. They had a very negative campaign. In spite of what they're saying to you, we have the proof. This is not just me saying it, the proof is there on my phone. So, as I said, today is a day for my family, for Brian, to celebrate. Brian's track record stood to him. We got that on the doors going around. People were very, very angry with the way he was treated. We have a situation with Brian where 2 adults and his private life being investigated, and when they got to a point where they realised that there was an attempt to extort 60,000, let's say it as it is, blackmail, absolutely blackmail, and the party failed to pass that on to the guards. Only done so when Brian left the party, when he had given up all hope of having a fair hearing. What I would also say, that 5 months on, after giving 27 years service to this party, I haven't had as much as a phone call, not a phone call, from the party leadership or anyone to ask how I am. They have a duty of care to all their members, including their public representatives. I'm one of them, the only one at the minute. They haven't made a phone call to ask how Brian's children were, how his granddaughter is. Absolutely nothing. It just counted for nothing. 40 years of his life and 27 years of my life. And what for? So what I would say, you're probably wondering now, why am I still in the organisation? So let me say, if you're asking that question, and what I would say to you is this: I'm going nowhere. I have no announcement to make. I want my questions answered. And if I get those questions answered, then and only then I will make my decision in terms of my future in Sinn Féin. Until then, I won't be bullied out by anyone, and I won't be deterred by anyone. I want questions answered, and then I'll make my decision.
That was Councillor Caroline Dwan Stanley there, speaking to Midlands 103's David Hollywoods in the Count Centre in Portlaoise following the general election at the end of November this year. And as you'll probably be aware now, she has made a decision, and as of last night it was announced that Councillor Dwan Stanley had resigned from the Sinn Féin party. Just to say a big thank you to all for listening in 2024, and looking forward to continuing on Saturday View in 2025. Thank you for all your texts as well, between grandchildren, sporting highlights, both national, local, international. Lots of people highlighting what's going on around the world, though, with conflict too, and lots more in between. But anyway, thank you for listening. Hope 2025 will be a great year for us all too. Lorraine McCormack is here next with Feel Good Saturday. I'll talk to you all next year.
Saturday View, with thanks to Lumcloon Energy, pioneering innovation, powering progress. LumcloonEnergy.com. Midlands 103.